All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Open Gear webinar. Today, we'll discuss achieving network resilience in retail. I'm Drew, and I'm joined today by Joe Valha. Joe is a member of the Open Gear team that has been involved in a number of our network solutions for our retail end users. And today, he's going to walk us through some key points to think about regarding networks in those types of environments. So real quick, before I hand the control over to Joe, I do want to give a quick introduction to OpenGear. So we've been doing business for about 15 years, and we have a focus on network resilience. And by that, we simply mean we focus on giving you access to your critical network infrastructure, even during the event of a network outage. And for more information on that, you can just visit our website, opengear.com. And if you particularly want to learn about our retail solutions, just go to opengear.com/retail. So I want to quickly run through kind of the things that we'll discuss on the call today. We're going to start by describing what a typical retail network looks like and kind of where the vulnerabilities are. Then we'll get into where smart out of band fits into that network environment. And lastly, Joe's going to wrap up with a summary of some of our real life case studies regarding smart out of band with some of our retail clients. And with that, I'm going to hand the controls over to Joe.
So thanks everybody for jumping on this webinar with OpenGear this morning. I promise we're not going to do death by PowerPoint and keep you guys engaged for an hour here. We'll make this kind of brief, but talk a little bit about how OpenGear can help with network resilience or maximizing network uptime in a retail network environment. So to begin with, so what does a typical network retail environment look like today? You've got typically the most important component that we want to keep up 100% of the time. We're going to be point of sale terminals. We want to always make sure that we can keep recognizing revenue. A lot of retail environments that I work with today also have some smart in-store displays that they need to keep displaying key information, as well as guest Wi-Fi. I always kind of make the joke now, I've got a 15-year-old son, and network availability is really crucial. I mean, he won't even go to a Starbucks if the Wi-Fi is down. So guest Wi-Fi has become kind of a key thing for customer set as well. So if you look at a typical retail environment, you've got number one, internet connectivity coming into that location. So we can either have legacy technology like T1s, we can have MPLS circuits going in, we can have satellite, or we can have more current up-to-date solutions like SD-WAN and cable modems. But obviously, the biggest thing that we need is connectivity into that retail store. And then in terms of on-prem equipment, you're typically going to have a router, you're going to have a switch, you're going to have a firewall. Sometimes you'll have a PDU, sometimes you'll have a UPS for battery backup in the event of an outage. And in an environment like this, where are we vulnerable? A lot of this probably seems a little bit obvious, but connectivity coming into that site. So things like failure at the ISP goes down. Backhoe cutting a fiber, I didn't realize that that still happens, but my customers keep telling me that it is still in 2019 a very viable means of network disruption for the physical connectivity getting cut into that store. DDoS attacks, natural disasters, things like that, anyway, that you can have a disruption to that network connectivity. Otherwise, there's also potential networking issues. So network config errors, hardware failures, power failures. I had one of my retail guys tell me a month or two ago that they brought a site down because a driver plowed into one of the transformers a block away and took power out to 5 square blocks. Or failed firmware updates. So I'm actually based here outside of Chicago, and I don't know if anybody remembers, about 2 or 3 years ago, United Airlines had a network glitch at O'Hare, and it took out United's entire network for over 7 hours. The losses that they saw were into the hundreds of millions of dollars. And about a week later in the Chicago Tribune, they had an article on what happened. It was a third-party network engineer contractor trying to update firmware on a Cisco router, brought everything down. So where does OpenGear fit in to provide a resilient network for retail? Well, when you put a OpenGear small little console server about the size of a paperback book with embedded cellular for the out-of-band piece, now you've got a 4G LTE connection into that store and an out-of-band path if there's a network disruption, so you have remote hands to troubleshoot and remediate. With cellular out of band, we also offer an awesome feature, which is failover to cellular. So if the physical connection or the internet connectivity coming into your router is disrupted, your router can instantly fail over to the 4G LTE connection in the OpenGear box and keep point of sale terminals up and running, keep VoIP phones up and running, and keep a PC up and running for checking inventory status, placing orders, etc. Then that router can fail back over when network connectivity is restored. We also have a centralized management platform called Lighthouse. Now, you don't need to use Lighthouse to use any of our hardware solutions, but once you get to more than a handful of devices, so with, Lighthouse is that single pane of glass that allows you to monitor and manage multiple devices. Again, if you've got 3 Jiffy Lubes out there, probably don't need Lighthouse. But if you're a large retailer that's got hundreds of locations, you really need that single pane of glass to make it easier to quickly drill down to, I got an outage in Piscataway, New Jersey, and I need to get to that Cisco router. So I wanted to run through a couple real-world scenarios of customers that I've worked with over the last 6 or 7 years and how we've been able to provide them a resilient solution for their individual environment. The first case study is I worked with a large travel center company. They're based here in the United States, and they operate full-service truck stop gas stations. So these are those large full-service centers that's got a convenience store, it's got a restaurant, it's got showers, it's got a game room, and they have over 250 locations. So the challenge when they came to us is they said, we have no out-of-band in place. We've had a couple network outages, and we realized we need to have something in place for an out-of-band solution. So we presented them our little ACM 7004. It's a 4-port serial console server, again, the size of a paperback book, and Lighthouse, because again, they had over 250 locations. So do the math, 250 locations times 4 devices per site. That's over 1,000 devices they want to manage. So again, single pane of glass is super important. So the impact was no disruption to revenue collection, increased customer sat. When I first sat down and we were kind of going through cost justification, they were like, I'm not really sure that it's going to be able to easily show ROI to our CFO. And I kind of took them through, well, let's look at the impact of a network outage at one of your full service gas stations. So boom, you lose network connectivity. The first truck driver that comes in, pulls his 18-wheeler up to the pump and swipes his credit card and nothing happens. He can't fill his truck. So the first thing he thinks is, well, the pump's just having a glitch. And he goes inside and finds out, hey, sorry, we've got a network issue. We're going to be down for a little bit. One thing I didn't realize is one 18-wheeler filling up with gas is about $900. So let's start looking at the cost of downtime. So that's $900 in sales revenue that are missed. But here's the key thing. Among the truck driver community, what happens is when that guy realizes that service station is down, the first thing he does is he gets on the CB radio and he tells everybody, hey, the gas station here at exit 12 in Des Moines, Iowa is down. Keep driving. So now nobody stops at that gas station. And so the revenue implications rack up really quickly, because even if network connectivity is restored within the next hour or 2, not only did we lose revenue for 2 hours, but nobody's getting on their CB radio and telling, hey, everybody, this one's back up and running. So with that failover to cellular feature, if they do have a network disruption, it still keeps those point of sale terminals up and running. So nobody gets on the CB radio and has trucks keep driving by. The next one that I want to talk to is a large furniture retail. It's a high-end retail chain. The company produces sofas, chairs, tables, office furniture, bedroom furniture, outdoor furniture, which it sells throughout retail stores across North America. Similar situation in that they had an outage where a store was actually closed for 3 days because of a network disruption, and the loss of revenue was pretty significant. So they came to us and said, hey, what can we do to prevent this in the future? So we presented them again our ACM 7000 with Lighthouse for centralized management. And literally in January of this year, their store in San Diego had a backhoe cut their fiber into the store. Again, I didn't really think that still happens, but it obviously does. And so we found out about this network disruption. We called them up, sat down with them, and said, so what happened and how did that failover to cellular work? And they said, it was awesome. You kept my store open for 4 days. You kept my POS terminals up and running so I could still take revenue. You kept my PCs up and running so I could check inventory and actually place orders for customers in the store. And you kept our VoIP phones up and running so we were still, quote, open for business. I said, did you chew through a lot of cell data? They said, yeah. And they said, but the bill that we got from Verizon was insignificant compared to the impact of revenue if that store stayed closed for 4 days. And they said, you were a lifesaver. But on a side note, I thought this was kind of funny. They said, so over the 4 days that we had the store open and up and running on the OpenGear 4G LTE connection, what we saw about 22 to 24 meg down speed and about 11 to 14 up. And they said, so the only thing the guys in the stores noticed was when the backhoe cut the fiber, the internet got faster because their standard connection was like a 10 meg connection. So they said, please make sure to show us how we can prevent those users from turning on the 4G LTE full time to get faster internet. But again, awesome situation where we were able to keep their store up and running for 4 days through that network outage. And then the last one that I wanted to talk about is back in 2017, I started working with a large consumer electronics retail chain. They have over 1,400 locations in the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And they had a 15-plus-year-old out-of-band solution of what everybody who was smart and wanted network resilience did in the 80s, which was analog modems, so those infamous US Robotics 9600 baud modems, analog phone lines or POTS lines, and old terminal servers. The solution was out of date. POTS lines get stupid expensive now. They were cheap in the 80s, and now the big three carriers want nothing to do with copper. And so the prices typically are going up every quarter, and they're not reliable. People, a lot of times you find in the field, they'll unplug the phone line from that modem and put it into a printer to send a fax. You also had store guys that on their own, they kept getting this phone bill and said, wait a minute, I can save, we're paying like $75 a month for that copper phone line, that POTS line. They said, wait a minute, I can save over $800 a year if I disconnect that phone line because look, nobody's made a phone call out of that closet in like 3 months. Why do we need it? So they had an out-of-date solution. They were very interested in cellular. They came to us. They did a proof of concept on our ACM 7004. And they said, look, if we're going to roll this out to 1,100 stores in the United States, what your hardware does is going to be important, but what Lighthouse does is going to be even more important. I definitely need a solid, scalable, single pane of glass to manage 4,400 devices. So how well we scaled up to their large requirement was really important to them. So last year in 2018, they rolled out of the United States 1,150 of our ACM 7004s with cellular. And two key things that they saw. Number one is when they were originally getting funding for this project, they were budgeting an installation charge. They estimated at about $350 per site because they really weren't sure. They thought they were going to need to send like a CCIE guy out to do the setup, configuration, and installation of the OpenGear box. Well, we took them through a key feature of Lighthouse, which is zero-touch provisioning. And what zero-touch provisioning, we, router guys have been doing it forever, but we pioneered it on the console server side. What zero-touch provisioning allowed them to do is we showed them how you can bring a piece of our hardware into their configuration center and load up what we refer to as an enrollment bundle and apply that enrollment bundle into the ACM 7004 and then ship that unit out to a retail store. And once that unit arrived, all they had to do was plug in a network cable and a power cord, and our unit would automatically call home into Lighthouse. It would get all of its configuration information automatically. It would get any available firmware updates that were available, and then it would automatically enroll itself into Lighthouse. So they went from a $350 install cost to, wait a minute, I can spend $40 and just have a Geek Squad guy do that. So they ended up seeing a savings of almost $100,000 of what they thought they were going to have to pay to just install the hardware. But the biggest savings, again, over 1,100 retail stores, the average that they were paying for that copper phone line per month per store was about $72. Well, when you get rid of 1,150 POTS lines and you go with embedded cellular, a typical remediation session from OpenGear over cellular typically only choose 100 to 300K of data. So they literally went to their cellular carrier and they got 1,150 SIMs, each one with a 1 meg plan that was just under $5 a month. So in 2019, it looks like they will save almost $2 million in telephony charges. So obviously my WAN guy there is kind of a hero. So those are three examples of some large retail environments that were concerned with availability. They needed maximum uptime. They wanted that failover to cellular feature, and they've experienced some real world hard savings in costs, increased customer satisfaction, and just the peace of mind that they've got a really cool network resilience solution in place. As Drew mentioned, we have some resources available in the handout section that include a retail white paper, a nice little infographic, and obviously you can find more information on opengear.com, or I believe we will also provide contact information in a follow-up email after this webinar. So now we'd like to go ahead and open it up for Q&A. I'm going to hand this back over to Drew, or Drew, you can just feed any questions that you've had come in so far.
Yep. Thanks, Joe. Great presentation. So yeah, we do have a few questions here for you. Here's a question that I think is actually particularly relevant towards the retail use case. So this person has warehouse locations and switch closets across the U.S. and their corporate headquarters in Pennsylvania. They're looking for a solution that gives them access to the switch closets if connectivity is severed, but they made it clear that they're not trying to run their internet off of the appliance. They just need basic cell connectivity so that they can console into the switches in the rack in case their primary network goes down. So I guess we can answer this question. Maybe just they asked specifically if they should be looking at the ACM, but maybe we can just run through what a customer should be thinking about when they're trying to decide what OpenGear product is best for them.
Well, when you're considering deploying OpenGear console servers for out-of-band, there's really only a couple basic questions you need to ask. The first and foremost is, are you going to look for cellular connectivity? So are you going to look at one of our units with embedded cellular or not? One of the nice features of OpenGear with our cellular units that I always like to point out is they are carrier agnostic. And so what that means is if you have a retail site, or any site as a matter of fact, but let's say you're going to deploy a unit in Seattle and you're based in Pennsylvania. So you call the network guy up in Seattle and you say, hey, look at your cell phone. How many bars you got and what's your carrier? And they go, oh man, we got Verizon here. We've got awesome coverage. I got 4 bars of 4G LTE. And so you send them a Verizon box. But let's say a year or two down the road, you end up closing that site in Seattle and you ship that unit to Miami. And the Miami location has got terrible Verizon coverage, but they've got awesome AT&T coverage. Unlike my cell phone, all you've got to do with the OpenGear box is reflash firmware to switch carriers. It takes about 2 minutes. So you can switch between AT&T, Verizon, and Sprint on the units in the US. We have units in Canada. You can switch between Bell, Telus, and Rogers. So the first consideration is, am I going to look at cellular? If I'm in a data center environment and I don't really want to go cellular because my data center is built like a Faraday cage, and for out of band I use my management LAN versus the production LAN, maybe I don't need cellular. So to go with cellular or not is the first consideration. And the next one is just port density. So the ACM units come configured in 3 different flavors. We have a unit all in the same form factor. We have a unit that has 4 serial console ports. We have a unit with 8 serial console ports. We have a unit with 4 serial console ports and a built-in 4-port Ethernet switch. One key thing to keep in mind is all of the ACM products have 4 USB ports, and those USB ports offer enhanced USB support. Because OpenGear a couple years ago started to see the larger network equipment manufacturers like Cisco and Juniper start to transition the form factor of their console ports from RJ45 to USB. So all 4 USB ports on the ACM 7000 series can be USB console connections. So in theory, my 4-port box becomes an 8-port box, my 8-port box becomes a 12-port box. And typically, at a remote site, I might have a router, a couple switches, a firewall. I typically don't need, in almost every situation that I've dealt with, I don't need more than 8 serial console ports at a remote site. So for that customer's question where you've got corporate in Pennsylvania, you've got remote sites all over the place, and you're not looking to use the cellular for anything other than just out of it, not keeping a site up and running and using that failover cellular feature, Again, I would recommend one of our cellular units because now you've got remote hands in case there is network disruption where I can do things and remediate. We monitor and manage virtually every vendor's intelligent use. Now I've got remote outlet control. I can reboot a hung router, which a lot of times can resolve that problem. So again, in that particular scenario, I'd probably recommend the ACM 7000 series of cellular, not enable the fail of the cellular feature.
Awesome. Awesome. Great. Thanks for that. Cool. So our next question looks like it actually comes from an OpenGear customer. So this person has about 40 or so ACM 7004s, the Canadian version. In a couple of locations, they're having issues due to building construction, and they're wondering what the max length of the 50 ohm cable is in case they have to move antennas. Or maybe I guess we can just talk in general about anything that
cellular reception.
What's that?
So just kind of generally on cellular reception.
Right. So they're having some issues with cellular reception. So how can they improve that?
Well, whenever I talk to customers about using cellular for out of band, the number one and number two questions that come up is cellular reception and then cellular security. So for this particular question, in terms of cellular reception, a couple ways to go here. The first thing that I always point out is a lot of times with OpenGear, what we're replacing is a legacy solution with an analog modem and a POTS line. So if you're not going to use the failover to cellular feature, but you're just going to use cellular for out of band, you don't need a big pipe, right? So I always say, if you're just looking for cellular for out of band and you look at a location and say, okay, look at my cell phone. I got 4 bars of 4G LTE, I'm fine. If I have 1 bar of 4G LTE, I'm still fine. If I look down at my phone and it's now failed back to 3G, I'm still fine because what I was replacing was 9600 baud. And if I'm just doing stuff with the CLI, I don't need 5G bandwidth. But what we first of all say is if you have issues with cellular reception, as an example, on our data center boxes, our larger 1U network appliances, they all come in the box with a 10-foot magnetic mount antenna extension. So if you think and envision in your mind an empty 42U rack, and you were going to put the OpenGear box at the bottom of the rack, you simply attach that magnetic mount 10-foot antenna extension, and now you mount the cellular antenna on the very top of the rack, which gives you a couple more dB. If that is not enough and you still need more reception, you can typically run, Rick might want to validate this, but I think you can run up to about 50 or 100 feet on that cable extension. And anything in those distances, you might want to switch to a low loss cable and potentially a third-party antenna. But we also, and we can take this offline if they have specific concerns, kind of do more of a tech deep dive with one of the SEs in terms of some boosters that we've tested and some third-party solutions that we've had successful deployment with. But I would have them reach out to their SE and kind of go a little bit more in depth on that.
Okay, sure. So yeah, I'll be sure to mention that to the customer. Thank you. So we have another question here. We are mainly a Cisco Palo Alto F5 shop, and they were just wondering what manufacturers OpenGear console connections are compatible with.
So we really are compatible with anything out there with a console port. So our customers every day use our products to gain remote access to everybody you can think of, all the big names. So Cisco, Brocade, F5, Palo Alto, Extreme Networks. Anything out there, as I mentioned again, with a serial console port. And also, if you want to, again, reach out to your SEs for more information, we just announced in the newest version of Lighthouse the ability to connect remote over IP to devices that do not have serial console ports. So if it's a network piece of gear, we can support it.
Awesome. So here's a general question here, but how would OpenGear help with an SD-WAN deployment?
Well, as you know, and everybody on the call knows, SD-WAN is the new hottest network topic out there. You know, a couple of years ago it was big data, then it went to IoT, and then it went to the cloud, and now it's all about SD-WAN, and all everybody knows is, hey, I can get rid of an expensive MPLS circuit, and I can just bring $100 a month in Comcast cable modem and get 100 meg service, and now I deploy an SD-WAN router, and boom, it's awesome, and I save a ton of money. Without going into kind of a tech deep dive, out of band is still crucial whether you have SD-WAN or not. But if you have an SD-WAN deployment, you know, whether you're using, you know, any of the top manufacturers of SD-WAN gear, the biggest thing that I see from working with customers is their old Cisco 2900 router, or basically any Cisco router out there. You never really had to do much updating. It wasn't like you had a firmware update. It's not like you had a Windows update, you know, every 6 to 7 weeks. It was a very stable product. But a lot of times what we've seen is network disruptions occur on firmware updates. Well, the software stacks that are so much more complex than an SD router give way to many more updates to that stack, and updates always are a hold your breath, cross your fingers proposition. So in my personal opinion, I think out of band is even more important if you're deploying SD-WAN, because potentially for a network glitch, I think actually goes up a little bit. But at the end of the day, whether you've got SD-WAN or not, I want access to my critical network infrastructure if the network goes down, so I don't have to roll a truck and I don't have to send an engineer at his car 20 minutes or 5 hours away to reboot a router.
Excellent, excellent. All right, and so I'm gonna wrap up with this last question here. And again, if you guys have more questions, you can email us at sales@opengear.com or marketing@opengear.com, and we'll try to get those answers to you. But in the sake of time, I'll end with this. So we have a remote site with a Windstream-owned router with six T1 circuits for data, voice, and internet. We're looking for a solution where if the device is unable to ping our corporate headquarters network, indicating a failed WAN connection, to then fail over and redirect traffic through a cellular connection. So I guess this almost pretty much, I think, describes our failover to cellular.
Defines our failover to cellular solution, exactly.
Right. So the question was if our product was capable of this, and I guess Joe, like you were saying, for our cellular-enabled console servers, the simple answer would be yes, our product is capable of that.
Yep, and the way that question was worded, it also brought one other interesting thing that I'll bring up before we wrap, as we wrap this up here. You know, I mentioned that the two number one questions and number two questions that we get when we talk about cellular is security and cellular signal strength. So a lot of people, when they think about cellular for out of band, they think, well, wait a minute, I don't want to just have the cellular modem out there hanging out there with, you know, everybody can hack it. So again, the way that question was worded, and I'm not going to go through a technical deep dive on cellular security, but one thing I do want to mention is a lot of my customers, the way they'll configure the OpenGear box is very similar to the way that customer asks that question is they'll configure the OpenGear box to at periodic intervals ping the IP address of the router or a known IP address, and as long as they can get out, they figure the network is up and running, that there's not an issue, and that cellular modem's not even turned on. It's only if it can't get out that it'll turn itself on and call home automatically into Lighthouse. Similarly, you can configure the OpenGear unit so that you've got a remote site, the cellular modem's turned off. If there's a network outage, somebody at that site pings your iPhone and says, hey, the network's down here in Piscataway, New Jersey. I can send a predefined SMS text to the OpenGear box and turn that modem on and have it automatically call home into Lighthouse. So that's kind of a little bit different spin on the failover to cellular, but I just kind of wanted to mention that as just a quick little security issue.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Joe, for the presentation, and thank you everyone for joining on the call. Just a reminder, I will send an email with the recording in case you wanted to review or in case you missed anything. And there are handouts here for your reference as well. We have the infographic, a white paper, and a retail out-of-band sell sheet for your reference as well. Thank you, guys. Take care. Bye.